I was literally taken out of the room. I mean, they came over me more than one, and I was like, you know, they were on me, not roughed up or anything, but just I was dragged out of the room. But I got like 6 or 7 frames, and those were the pictures.
This podcast is brought to you by Squarespace. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Brooklyn PhotoWorks ISO 320 podcast. And today we've got an incredibly special guest, legendary photographer, Chuck Fishman. That's right, guys. You heard it. We have Chuck Fishman on the podcast today. Chuck has had a pretty illustrious career. I mean, I kind of feel like a little kind of neophyte comparatively, and that's a good thing. I mean, to be able to get inspiration through somebody and have a conversation with, you know, somebody that you consider to be a legend is a true honor. And without further ado, welcome, Chuck. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it, man.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
There's something about your photographs that each one of them tells a story. And I can't even imagine how you even came about to say, like, okay, this is the one Fats Domino photo. Like you probably have hundreds, thousands. I mean, obviously you were shooting film, so maybe you don't have like tens of thousands like modern photographers.
Right.
You were shooting at 20 frames a second, right, Chuck?
So
my hands go fast enough.
How did you come about to get access to be on the stage with Chuck Berry, Herbie Hancock, you know, I mean, you know, everyone, Art Blakey, I mean, James Brown, like this photo of him, like the sweat and just unfreaking real. I mean, it's so undeniably iconic. How did you get this access, and what was going on at that time for you?
Well, you know, James Brown, you know, known as the hardest working man in show business, but also nicknamed as the sweatiest working man in show business. Well, it varied. You know, there was no one course.
Right.
So everything always varied. And then with whatever variance it was, whatever the situation was, obviously you exploit the hell out of it.
Right.
And, you know, if necessary, slightly bend rules, you know, don't hurt anybody, but just get what you need, you know, do what you can do.
Of course.
But really it always varied. And one reason why music and musicians was important to me was when it came time to really decide what I wanted to do with my life, I was either going to be a musician or a photographer. And I think I chose wisely because, and I still have my trumpet right here behind me. And sometimes and every few months I take it out of the case, you know, but I use the case sometimes to
dust it
my
off
foot.
and
use it as a footstool, you know, today's case. Oil up the valves every few months, blow a little bit, lips puff up, and it's like, and then it's like, oh God, you suck. You know, in fact, I mean, if you guys, as far as stories, I mean, there's one variable. I spent a month with Count Basie and his band on the road, shooting. Not playing, shooting.
Where was the tour?
Tour was U.S. It was a U.S. tour starting from the East Coast to the West.
Okay.
With both buses and planes, and then it was several months later when finally I was able to have to get accepted, to get my invite to Basie's home in the Bahamas. And then he and I spent a few days photographing him in his house. He was a sweet guy. He was a really, really, really nice guy. But I wanted to see what it was like on the road as a musician, but as a photographer. And I'm glad I chose to be the photographer than a musician. But it was cool. I mean, it was nice. It was a lifestyle. And also, you know, when I was shooting like that, then that was the lifestyle, you know, of a working single photojournalist. At the time, it was primarily male, not entirely for sure, but primarily male. But it was a great younger single man's lifestyle. And as far as musicians are concerned, New Orleans was always close to my heart. So I initially did an essay on older New Orleans jazzmen, ones who had played in Storyville, which is the red light district, which was closed down by the Navy in 1917. And in 1976, there were literally a handful, a handful of musicians still alive who had played Storyville. And I wanted to meet them. You know, I wanted to photograph them. I wanted to talk to them, I wanted to record them. And I did audio interviews and photographed those I could find. I had Alan Jaffe from the Preservation Hall help me find a couple. I researched at the Jazz Archives at Tulane University, and you know, look and see who I could, you know, what was who was available. And I found like five or six.
Wow.
Maybe. And at one day I actually brought five of them together, because some of them had thought the others had died. You know, it was a trip. It was a trip and a half. It was something that I just wanted to do. And then I was a student still when I did that, and that was like a summer essay. But when I became a working professional, you know, music, you know, well, New Orleans, I would go to the New Orleans Jazz Festivals, which should have been happening this week if it wasn't Corona times. And at Jazz Fest, you know, there was access. I mean, I got more access than possibly was
allowed to you.
Oh, thank you for the word, Daniel. Thank you. Yes, but you know,
but you didn't kill anybody.
Exactly. No one got hurt, and that's the whole.
It's full circle, yeah.
And that's all that counts. That is all that counts. Nobody got hurt, and you know.
How did it work logistically when you were on the road? Did you hold on to all your film? Did you mail it back? Did someone process it for you?
That depended. Also, when I was working, when I started working as a real, you know, a working pro, I was with Contact Press Images, which is still around, boutique international agency, based in New York, offices in Paris, and agents in other countries. But when I was with Contact, a good typical, even typical is a loose word because nothing was really typical, but a good trip would be, you're on the road I was on the road, let's say 3 months at a time. Had a duffel bag, big black duffel bag was my main bag. Domke bag, which was the camera bag of choice at the time. Actually, that was when I was a little bit later, because when I first started, Jim Domke hadn't started making the bags yet. Domke bag and a carry-on bag. And the carry-on for planes. And the carry-on bag held a 400, a tripod, and you know, usually film or other essential items. And I would, let's say, go somewhere. Let's say I did a lot of work in Poland, so let's say I would go to Poland initially, spend time there, usually, and mark up film, keep the film, put them in film envelopes, write the information on film envelopes, and that was our metadata of the time. And whether, if anything was newsworthy or not, if it was newsworthy, that was a different story. If it wasn't newsworthy, then I simply held on to my film. and let's say, and then go to a different from one country. Let's say go to another one. Let's say, an example. This is a real example. I was shooting in Turkey. I was in the country of Turkey, and an assignment had come in through contact to do a shoot in Egypt for Fortune magazine. It was they wanted to do a cover story on Anwar Sadat and the leading businessmen in the Egyptian economy. So because I was like logistically closer on a world map than somebody flying from New York, then and I had I'd done whatever I was just shooting whatever in Turkey. I got the gig, went to Cairo, met a Fortune journalist, an older guy, and stayed at a 5-star hotel, because I was on assignment and that's where you stayed. But usually if you weren't on assignment, and oftentimes working on speculation, you stayed in shit. You stayed wherever.
When you said 5-star, I just pictured like grapes being, fed to you.
And you stay. When you're working really as a speculative photojournalist at the time, anyway, it's like, who has a couch, who has a floor, what's the cheapest 1-star hotel that's safe, and that was that. But so went to Egypt, shot the story for Fortune, and so that film was able to then go from there. When that shoot was finished, it then came to, it was flown to New York, was shipped to New York. And I don't remember where I went after Egypt.
And you did not, so your agency would process and develop, and
I had nothing to do with
nothing to do with it.
Okay.
No. It was black and white at the time, or did you shoot
black and white was, if it was on assignment, it was normally color on assignment. Black and white, I shot personally.
Okay.
So
and that Anwar Sadat photo, do you remember what was your color film choice?
Kodachrome.
Oh, Kodak.
Oh yeah. Well, Kodachrome, unless one was on a deadline, or one had really low light and needed higher speed Ektachrome. I, as well as others within Contact, because Contact, we weren't as concerned with deadlines. We were concerned with imagery, and the choice of film. Hey, best film was Kodachrome. I mean, period. The end.
Yeah.
And that was so. If you were on an assignment and it was a deadline, then you needed to shoot Ektachrome. So sometimes one was shooting Kodachrome for longevity, Ektachrome so that they could see something quickly, as well as then black and white for yourself and for the agency to then possibly distribute some black and white to other magazines. Because because it was all loose. We were all freelance. It was loose. So if you got an assignment, let's say a Time magazine assignment, and so Time would process everything or have everything processed. Your film would get shipped or couriered or whatever directly to Time. They would send out the Kodachrome to Kodak for processing, because those of you who don't know, Kodak was the only place that you can get your Kodachrome processed in those years. Ektachrome, Time would process, and black and white Time would process in their lab in the Time Life building. And
now you said sometimes you'd have 3 different films loaded into your cameras. So I know that I first met Chuck because I responded to a Craigslist ad in which I was just like diving in headfirst to film developing and printing, which after meeting Chuck, I sort of took a big step back because to do it right, it's going to take a lot of time. And he said, you know what? Look me up before you come over. Or did you look me up? Something, it didn't come off arrogant, didn't come off. It came off, I think, the way you meant it to come off. And so I did. And I was like, oh, all right. I have something to talk about with this guy. And then I met him, met you, and we sort of realized very quickly that you're a Leica man. You love your film Leicas. And I think anyone who's listened to this podcast before knows that that's the heart of our friendships, all through Mark and Adam and myself. And it sort of has inspired me personally to work at that home processing and scanning, and you've helped me sort of get my feet wet, I guess is the saying. I don't even know if that's a saying. That could be just gross. I don't know. That could be gross.
Fingers
but
wet.
Fingers. Yeah. And now I'm actually successfully doing it. I guess to some sort of, we can get into, my fuck ups in a little bit. So you have an M2.
I have an M2, which was my first Leica that I got in college.
Mm-hmm.
And I still use. I have an M2, a single stroke M3, and a classic M6. And I've had various M4s, which I've used and sold years and years ago. I think I got rid of my last M4. Was it M42 or an M4P? I had an M42 and M4P, but I had gotten rid of them. But when the M6 came out, it was like, as far as I was concerned, I don't need that camera anymore. My favorite camera of choice, shooting film for anything is the M6. And again, it's the classic M6. It's not the TTL or whatever that stuff is. And
I try to talk. I was trying to talk to you, sitting in your kitchen and talking about digital, trying to gauge your either love or hate or disdain or whatever it may be. And like, why don't you try the M bodies? And you're sort of push and pull with it, and you're like cracking up just hearing talk about it. What's sort of been and you said when you do shoot digital, you shoot a Canon or something like that, right? When something requires digital. What stopped you from kind of going to the Leica digital so you can use your lenses and have the same focusing system?
I just never saw the point. For me, and especially the last, I don't know how many years, many years, when I'm shooting with Leicas, it's personal work. And I never saw the need or the reason to shoot digital Leica. Not that, not that there, in this day and age, there is a reason for it. If you're actively shooting and if you're actively shooting and need to get stuff out and you're a Leica guy, then yes, you need it. Like really like need to get something out, need to shoot, edit, tone, get it out. That's one thing. I don't have to do that. I mean, I don't do that anymore, or I don't do that. When I'm shooting on assignment or a job, or whatever, I'm shooting Canon digitals, Canon digital cameras. Takes me usually days to edit, and using basically Lightroom and possibly Photoshop as well, but takes me usually days to edit. And then get rid of it and give me my check and then leave me alone. That's a job and that's digital and it's done and goodbye. And then I'll get back to work. but a couple of years ago, I was gifted a little Fuji digital camera, Fujifilm digital, which sometimes I would just carry that around instead of an M6, because it was just quick and convenient, and it was wasn't something that it wasn't going to be a shoot that I really cared about, or like, for example, the last several years I've been going back and forth to Poland a lot, not a lot, back and forth to Poland, shooting film with my Leicas on a project that I had started in the 70s. So that's an analog film project. It was analog, obviously, in the 70s and 80s, and it still is for me. But a couple of times, after the first couple of times, I took the little Fuji with me also, and shot color. Sometimes if I was in a situation where I said, well, this could be like almost stock oriented, or it's journalistic enough that I could, maybe grab the Fuji and make a few snaps with that, and keep it raw, of course, and eventually, do something with that. But otherwise, to shoot with digital Leica, it's I've seen pictures that they're wonderful. They're wonderful.
I want to get into your Poland series, because that's sort of the first stuff I saw of yours, and what really drew me in, because your musicians, your historical people, those are all fantastic, powerful images. But what spoke personally to me was your Jewish Polish photo series, and that's how. And then I realized that you process them yourself, you print them yourself, and being lucky enough to see you do that process, it is mind-blowing how detailed and specific it is. Because I didn't come from that background, so I've never really been in a dark room before, and I've talked about this before, and it almost made me not feel so bad for the way I edit my digital photos in Lightroom, and dodging and burning and color and shadows and highlights. You're doing all that manually. The same thing, and we've talked about this, the same thing you're doing in the darkroom, you do digitally in Lightroom. But what is it that's kept you going in the film analog world?
On that series, on the Polish series, or just
specifically in the Polish series? I think it'll translate to why you still shoot film. And
on the Polish series, it was basically like a couple of reasons. One, it felt better. I go by feeling a lot. It felt better. But it was, in the 70s and 80s when I first, well, first of all, this is a project I started in 1975 on what was supposed to have been the last of Jewish life and culture in Poland, for a variety of reasons, without getting too historical. Post-Holocaust, there were various waves of emigration from Poland when after 90% of the population had been killed off, then of the Jewish population there. But then there were 8 waves of emigration, and 1968 was the last major, basically, anti-Semitic purge. And for post-68, it was deemed or said to have been, Poland and anywhere else, when the old survivors die off, that's it. That was 1,000 years of Jewish history in Poland, where most, like 80% of American Jews have lineage to that area. It was going to be the end of it. So in 75, I was still a student and did my senior project went to Poland with a writer, and together we kind of like tripped over each other's feet and speculatively produced this book on Polish Jews. I didn't know if I was ever going to go back. That was in '75. 3.5 years later, I was a working professional, and through an assignment that took me from New York to Stockholm to shoot the Nobel Prizes. Well, you know, Stockholm is really close to Poland, and it had just been announced that the new Pope, the first non-Polish, non-Italian Pope, was a Polish guy. And so it was natural. And so the world, the Western world, because this is communist Poland, the rest of the world was interested in Poland, supposedly. So magazines were interested. So it was natural that after I left Stockholm, I went to Poland to shoot the country. And on my own, I would photograph surreptitiously people that I'd met before, Jews, and just photograph them and continue to do that. And it turned out that that Poland became a place where I kept going back to for historical reasons for the next 5 years. It was the Pope, it was Solidarity, Lech Wałęsa. You know, it was a lot going on there. And it was after like my second time there, like in '79, April '79, I realized that, you know what, I'm gonna keep shooting whenever I'm here. I'm gonna photograph what I can on the Polish Jews, film, obviously. But I'm gonna archive this work. This work I'm not gonna publish. I'm not gonna even seek publishing. I don't wanna have it published because I don't want any of my pictures possibly ending up in a magazine or something that could have repercussions on the younger kids that I saw, the handful of that I saw growing up there. And this was, you know, this was a revelation to me, because when I first shot in '75, it was only old people, but now I saw a couple of kids and young people who I became friends with in the Yiddish theater, my age or younger or older. And I said, I'm not going to have my pictures possibly have a negative impact on their lives. Period. The end. I shot from '78 to '83. I archived that work until about 7 or 8 years ago. And so for 30, and then went back to Poland after 30 years. Going back, I felt it was only natural and normal to shoot film because I was continuing what I had left off. And I wanted to keep it in black and white film because it was a continuum as far as I was concerned. I photographed what was supposed to be the end of 1,000-year history, the end of a millennium. And when I was going back, I was in essence photographing the beginning of the second millennium with a whole new reemergence and reawakening of Jewish identity and people, real people, and it was normal to do it. I didn't want people to see the pictures, you know, anyone to look at the pictures from the old and new and say, oh, this is new. Obviously, look at it. It's whether it's in color or it's, you know, you can see it's digital, you know, it's like, so obviously this is new and that's the old stuff. Look, it's grainy black and white. It's obviously old. I want people to look at the pictures and have to really look at the pictures and say, and not have the choice of color versus film versus digital, not having that choice to say, oh, well, that must be the new stuff.
Did you use the same film?
Basically, yes. Primarily it was Tri-X. This time around, within the last 7 years, also some T-Max 3200 that wasn't made in the 70s and 80s. And also a couple of times in the 70s, 80s, I had run out of Tri-X and somehow had a couple of rolls of Ilford. So some of my late 70s work was in Ilford, but otherwise it was the vast majority of these pictures were shot on Tri-X.
When you use Tri-X now, do you notice a difference in the Tri-X? Because I've talked to we had Carmen Cita Lab on and talked about the formula being different from when they've reopened.
It is a different formula, but also I'm not processing some of the film now with the same kind of developer that I was processing then. So the developer also will obviously affects the grain. It affects latitude. It affects the film. So like when I first did my initial work in '75, the film, the processing I did was basically D76, D76 1:1. That was in '75. And for the pushed film, which was either like I pushed it to maybe 1200 or 1600, that was whether it was at the time AccuFine or probably AccuFine. You get nice sharp golf ball size grain. It's like, wow,
Do you scan it yourself now, or?
Yeah. That's all. Yeah. So actually now the work is double because before you made a print and there you go. Now, if you want to really make the best of what you can to have either reproduced or seen by a larger population, and seen it well, then you have to scan it. Sure, you can shoot when I've done it, I've shot, finished exhibition prints. I've shot them, with camera, with, lighting set up, but it's not as good as doing a really good scan of a negative. And sometimes that'll take hours. So, and then of course, just like Daniel said, well then in Photoshop, then I'm working the print. It's like I'm working the scan the same way I'd be working a print. I'm not a Photoshop expert by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, quite the opposite. But I do know how to burn and dodge, and that's what I do. First, got to spot everything, and that's spotting online, spotting with Photoshop. Sometimes it's easier than spotting on a print, and I spot on prints currently. I was spotted yesterday. So that could take, depending on how bad the neg is now, whether there's scratches or dust or whatever it is, that could take a couple hours, and then you first tone it. Then you first like, okay, what do I want to do with this? The curves, the this, the that, the burning, the dodging. What do you want to emphasize? How do you want the eye to flow? That's the same as making a print. How do you want this to really work? And then more than likely, like a print, you'll start. You think you got it. Put it away. 5 days later, you look at it and say, what was I thinking? So you'll say, oh no, wait a minute. This is too dark here. This is too light here. And it's like, you have to sometimes know when to just walk away. Sometimes you never can. Sometimes you just can't. And then sometimes, I'll look at a scan of a negative that I've printed, or the print, then the scan, one versus the other, and they look pretty different. And it's like, well, shit, I should the print is contrastier, it's this, it's that. Maybe I should put more contrast in the scan now. And maybe I should, and it's like, you never know. I don't never know. But anyway, getting back to the Polish Jews thing, it was for me, it was the right thing to do. It was, when people are looking at the current work, current meaning since 2013, if there's, that picture could have been shot in 1979, but wait a minute, there wasn't a Nike insignia on a kid's hat in 1979. That's the difference, so it's, so it's things like that. It's like, and that work's been exhibited now in Poland and in the States, and in silver prints, and there's a uniformity. I wanted a uniformity to that work, and that's exactly what it is. There's a uniformity to it, so that when you're switching from the 70s and 80s to the 2010s, it's like, it's modern, but it doesn't. It's modern, but why is it modern? It's not because it was digital, or it's not because it's suddenly in color. It's modern because they didn't have that stuff then. and they didn't have the logos or or whatever it might be, and I wanted the uniformity kept to that work.
Did you use the same lenses or like a similar lens that you've been using in the past?
Some. In Poland, in the 70s, 80s, I had my M2. I shot with the M2, as well as Canon film. Except when I first shot in 75, I used 2 Pentaxes. But my M2 with the older Summicron, silver Summicron, the 8-element Summicron that had the lock on it, that I asked Sherry Croyder to take away. So I have an unlocked 8-element 35 f2 Summicron. So I still shoot with that. But that was pre-83. From 2013 on, I have brought that camera as well as the M3 and M6 on those shoots. But also now I'm shooting with a newer 35 Summicron, the version 4, the Bokeh lens.
The Bokeh King, yeah.
The Bokeh King. So I shoot with that, and I shoot with and I bring a 50, and it varies. I have 2 50s, a Summicron and a Summilux, and sometimes, and it might sound, sometimes the Summilux is just too big to take. It's just, I'll go with the Summicron. Like if I'm packing 3 Leicas and a Fuji film camera, and I'm dealing with film, and which has become a major hassle, major hassle. Not just in terms of everything, in terms of airports, in terms of weight, security, x-rays, cost, everything. It's I don't know how much longer I'll do it. First of all, I don't even know when I'm going back to Poland, because I don't plan on going.
I don't even know when the fuck I'm leaving my house.
Exactly. I don't know.
I'm going to Poland.
Really? Yeah. I mean,
hey, Chuck, let me ask you this. I mean, I love the fact that you're using, these traditional methods of creating the art. It's like going to Cuba in a sense that, like, you can go there, and if you shoot with stuff that's kind of period, it's going to look timeless. And I guess that's the thing that I love about the Polish series, is that the Polish Jew series is that there's a timeless nature to it. And by keeping the medium consistent, you've been able to achieve that. What if, here's my question.
You said that so much better than I did. So
well, that's why I'm the host of this thing. And make it no, look, I love when people, artists, drill into their process, because it is the most fascinating place that you can be as a listener, because somebody's unlocking the door to a very secret, special, private place, and that's such a gift that you're sharing it with us. But thank you. My question for you though is, if I could hand you right now a digital Leica with whatever, and just say, look,
M9.
No. And just say, look, I assure you that you can get virtually identical results to your film shots with this camera. I bet you still wouldn't use it, but would you consider it? Like, in other words, through processing and through the abilities of the lenses and the sensor, there are black and white monochrome digital Leicas that produce exquisite results, and through processing and all that kind of stuff, it's very feasible that you could achieve an almost undistinguishably different look, so that you could save yourself all of the hassle. Although maybe that's just part of the whole workflow. Maybe that's what kind of informs what you're doing, that getting into that headspace, that there's all of these things that it wasn't easy for these people. It's not going to be easy for me. If this is too easy, how am I going to tell this story? Maybe that's part of it. It's interesting.
That eyebrow just went up. Chuck's eyebrow just.
It did? Okay. Well, first of all, it's a different mental space.
Hmm.
That's number one. You know, taking your M6 out with a 35 or a 50 on it, whatever, you and your maximum the maximum is 30 frames before you have to stop what you're doing and then either pick up another camera or rewind, reload, and continue. That changes your whole outlook to begin with. So you have to pick and choose. You have to really see. You have to delve. You have to, like, what's going to really work here? Am I going to just shoot around this and then maybe, or am I going to kind of like look at it first, or just go by the gut and just go straight in and go for whatever comes based on experience, just but knowing that, and then sometimes tell yourself slow down, and you have to literally tell yourself slow the fuck down.
Well, it's funny because we talk about that
all the time
when we talk about even shooting with our M9 versus our M10s. M10s, you don't have to slow down for a second. M9s, the camera will tell you when to slow the fuck down because it'll just stop
after 3 shots.
Yeah, 4 frames of buffer. You're like, all right, let me get my other camera and wait 20 seconds, and then So, and knowing you, I think the only digital camera that would work with your workflow and mentality would be the M9
or the M9 monochrome
or the M9 mono.
Or
Well,
both.
I think, and please tell me if I'm very off base, the amount of nuance and detail you see in a negative in your print, you're not going to be happy with anything that's not black and white film.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Maybe if there was anything digitally,
what
it would
about
be
what
the
about
M9
the
monochrome.
what about the M10M that produces almost medium format detail with some presets in there that emulate the look of grain? So you've got the exquisite detail, all of the tones. I mean, look, I think that you could do it. It's not a question of like, okay, let's take Chuck's workflow and tell him how to do his job. But it is
just prodding. We're poking it.
It's such an incredibly painstaking process, and but I think I honestly, in hearing Chuck talk about it, it almost sounds like that's a prerequisite in order for him to get to the place that he needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it even more special. And, I would never suggest anybody to change their workflow, of course. I mean, look, there's plenty.
I think it's working.
Plus, also the fact, and this is just, you need to advance that film.
Yeah.
If you don't, you're not going to make another picture. So
I think Chuck is right. There's a beauty in shooting film, and that's why I usually do it in personal projects, because it's just something different, something changes you. And like he said, you really take your time to nail that shot.
Well, you slow the fuck down. I think that's really the thing. I mean, look, it's like if I gave you, an Epson RD1 or whatever that, I hope I'm getting that right. It's a digital camera that's M mount. They made it in I guess the 90s. It's got a CCD sensor. It's cropped, and it actually has a thumb advance for each frame. So even though
you have to do it though.
You have to do it. It's a digital camera. I don't remember what the screen is like, but it's probably
it's
atrocious to the point where you wouldn't even look at it. Yeah, it's there's no reference other than there's an image perhaps there. So you would literally have to advance each frame. Now, granted, the image quality is not going to be the same, but it will slow you the fuck down. But yeah,
it costs you about $1,800.
Well, I'm not discounting, digital M's whatsoever. I mean, there's, I've seen beautiful, beautiful work in black and white, and a guy I know is doing some right now, and producing real stuff, and on the crisis in New York, and I know him, and I know he's using an M10, not the monochrome. He uses the M10, processes his files, and makes them black and white, and does his toning and everything, and he's done real work, which you probably have seen in the last week or so. Well, his name is Peter Turnley, and
You're like, give us a name, Chuck.
okay, so and you should and you know you should take a look.
Yep.
And there's he did a YouTube thing on like a week's or 10 days worth of work, and you know, Peter's a real photographer, and he's making real pictures, and he's using an M10 and the non-monochrome M10. I mean, I don't know about this stuff personally because I don't shoot with it, but I've seen his what he's done with it, and there's no question it's great. It can be great.
Yeah.
But
it's so much to do with the Leica lenses, the way that Leica lenses, capture light and render detail. And then what Leica has done, which I think, and we all agree, kind of differ from a lot of other camera manufacturers, is that they've been able to pair their sensors with their lenses to optimally be able to kind of keep that image quality, that Leica look, preserved to some extent. And of course, as a purist, as a film purist, there's nothing that's going to give you better resolution and detail and tonality than film. I completely agree with that. I'm sold on it. I started shooting film. I get it. But digitally, some of these Leica cameras are absolutely incredible. And, so I would never want to convince you otherwise, and I just pulled up Peter's website, and he is doing some beautiful stuff, and the toning is gorgeous. And it's, look, I think for you, coming from the career that you've had and coming from somebody who takes such painstaking, gives such painstaking attention to the process, you literally your hands are wet. You're in there. You've been doing this for ages. Digitally, you would probably be able to take these Leica files and wrestle them and really get them to look good. You could do it. But that would obviously change your process completely. So while film is still a viable option, why change it?
Well, there's also a bottom line. The bottomest line,
right,
is that let's say you take your digital file and then you want to make a print from it. Yes, you can have it made into a negative, so you can make your own personal silver print. But I want to end up with a print that I made, a silver print
right,
that I made, and not after it's like done, and then you just print it, poof,
right.
Like a machine. It's like each print from a negative.
Not like that machine. You're like, poof, it comes right out.
Each let's say you get 6 prints. Let's say you get 6 or 7 prints from a printing session, a darkroom session, and let's say and this after test strips and everything else, and let's say two of them are just so far off the charts of what you think is decent that either you rip them up immediately or you just put them aside and use them to write on, to make notes on. And that means you have 5. So let's say you have 5 prints from that one neg. And then it's like, are they really good enough? Number one, how many are really, really, really good enough? Because there will be differences in all of them. And then you take them to the next step after a couple of days later when they're dried, and you say, okay, these 5, well, it could be a little better with potassium ferrocyanide, with a little bleach in a couple of areas. It could make a better print to bring out the white, whether it's in an eye or whether it's in something where you just want to make it a little lighter. So, as well as then bring out some contrast. You want to bring out, you're going to bleach. Potassium ferrocyanide is a bleach. So then it's another process, and you can easily ruin any print with potassium ferrocyanide very easily. So let's say you try, let's say, okay, it's another session now. The lights are on, all the lights are on. The exhaust is going, the vent's going.
But you don't want to drink the bleach?
No, you inject it.
That should
it gets rid of the virus.
Yeah.
You inject it, yeah.
Oh yeah, you can inject it as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So and so you take your cotton, or your swab or whatever, and you try. Let's say on a test strip, you see how quickly the bleach is going to act, and it's like, and then let's say you're going on your first print and it's already wet, and now you blow off the area, so of the print, so that you can apply a little amount of liquid of the ferrocyanide, and it's like fast, the print's gone. I mean, you might be able to get it back quickly with some Dektol. Maybe that's a whole other thing, but possibly the print is gone. And it's like, fuck. It's like, why did I touch this print? It was okay.
It was right there. You had it. You didn't need to do a thing, but you wanted it to
go. Looking at it, it wasn't bad.
You had to give it 3 more days, and then it would have been good.
But this goes to 11.
That's right. So, but so let's say you're gentle, and let's say you get it, and okay, that fixes, that dries, whatever, and let's say you get 3 of them. So let's say 3 of them really are okay, or you don't even see the difference from before and after because you don't want to over bleach, So maybe there's a slight bit of difference on one, and barely any on the other, but there is some. But then, you see it when it's wet. When it dries down, you're not going to see it anyway. But but it's there. And but then the next step is, after that's washed and everything, nominally, is if you're really going to do it. And when I'm printing, I'm making exhibition prints, because if I'm printing unless they're little gift prints, RC resin coated little things to give away. Unless they're that, then they're exhibition prints, as far as I'm concerned. And then, so the next step is selenium toning. Well, that's a whole other day, and depending on the amount of toner you're using, the length of time it's in the toner, all that stuff will give it its own tone. That print, that paper, that concentration, that ratio of toner with water and whatever, it'll give that set of prints its own tonality. And if you're printing for an exhibition that you want uniform tonality, well, then you have to be very, 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 consistent. I don't like consistency. It's like I like what might happen. Like just what might happen. It's like,
why would you want your workflow to be any easier, right?
Yeah, no, like, where's the magic? No, like a lot of this has to do with magic. And I just listened to a great YouTube talk about this artist talking about magic and art, and anyway, it was great. But and he was actually, I'm going to move you guys over so I can, because I made a quote. I actually made a quote, wrote down a quote of what he had said. Oh, okay. And I don't know him personally, but this is what this guy wrote or said. Art descends from magic through the elements of play and their connection to ritual. I'm going to read that again. Art descends from magic through the elements of play and their connection to ritual. And that's a quote from a man named Jeffrey Dorfman. And Jeffrey Dorfman's an artist, and there's some video of him that I found via some link somehow, where he's giving a lecture about art and magic and the process and everything, and it just resonated with me. So it's like, no, I want to see what could happen. You know, what if I do this? What if, you know, what if it's a little bit? So those prints, those little couple of sets of prints or whatever, they're unique. You know, they're not going to come out of a machine and they'll all be the same. Now, some people might ask, well, don't you want them all the same? Like, don't you want to maybe make an edition of 25 and then they'll all be the same? And then it's like, no. I mean, I could see the benefits of that. But it's not something I really personally want to, you know, delve into.
It's funny because so many photographers, and I've even talked about it with you know, in workshops that I've done, is that, you know, being able to get predictable results based on certain techniques and understanding, you know, basic principles. And you know, look, you're at a point, or you probably have been for ages, where predictable results are boring. You know, if you wanted predictable results, you'd pick up a digital Canon, you'd get a digital M body, and you just know, you know, okay, I put this lens on at this aperture and this ISO, boom, 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 there it is. There's my image. Good night. Have a good day, everyone. You know, call me when it's over. So,
well, that's the beauty of shooting film, right?
Yeah. So I love this idea of magic because, you know, it's been a long time since I've been in the darkroom. So I did the opposite of you, Chuck. I started, you know, I studied photography in college. I had a darkroom, did the whole thing. And I started playing music before I got into photography. And then right after college, instead of going right into photography, I went into music, and I did that for a long time. So I took the hard route. But I do remember those days in the darkroom and the magic of the darkroom, and how it was like almost like a meditation, that I could literally just get lost in there for days and hours, and it was magical. And there's a part of me that really misses that, but there's also like this weird part of me that's like almost not afraid, but like I am like a little bit afraid to get back into it, knowing how far away I've gotten from it, and like, am I going to be good enough at it? You know, because I've departed from it for so many years. Like you know, I've forgotten everything pretty much. So, you know, I've become kind of lazy. Mm-hmm. But Daniel has inspired me, and I guess through you as well. I mean, Daniel has gone from 0 to 60 in a very short amount of time. I mean, he didn't know anything about processing a year or so ago, and look at him now.
I just tried to soak up as much as I could, and Chuck is gracious enough to invite me into his darkroom. And, you know, I email him, I call him, I text him, as Chuck, what the fuck's going wrong, man? I pull, you know, he tells me.
You don't text me. You don't text me, Daniel. You don't text me.
You're right. I don't text. I can't text. So I email, but you respond via email quicker than people respond with texts.
Okay.
So that's why, you know, I can keep it open. And, you know, from the dilution to I didn't know what HC 110. I didn't know anything. And, you know, he said, you're going to fuck up rolls. You're going to fuck up loading them. You're going to fuck up drying them. You're going to fuck up processing them. And anything you can fuck up, you're going to fuck up. And that's completely true. But the feeling for me when I successfully process rolls of film, dry them, scan them, every step along the way is so fulfilling, from being a digital shooter to stepping back and personally now solely basically I'd say 80% of my personal shooting right now is on film cameras with an M3 that Chuck found for me, actually, with the guy John Francois. We just had him on this past week. So you actually are the reason I know him, the reason now Adam knows him, and Mark.
I don't know him.
No, I know, but you found his. He actually knew you.
So Chuck, you were the trigger.
You're the trigger, and you're like, I found this M3. It looks clean to me. I don't know. And anyway, so, you know, thank you, because it's especially in this time when there's not much going on besides being a father, which is amazing. But having said that,
and those pictures, and I'm cutting in, and those pictures as a father will be the ones when you're older that will mean the most.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
they already mean the most at
So
this
make them
time.
good.
So
Make them good. Make them
I'm tr-
real.
I'm
Make them real
trying,
photos.
yeah.
They're beautiful.
Yeah. Make 'em-
Yeah.
And it's helped me become a better photographer, period, but also a better digital shooter.
Mhm.
Which now I can actually say digital shooter, analog shooter, because it's so different. And
So it's an interesting thing, and I agree completely about those photos of your family and your children. I mean, they're gorgeous photos, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass, but you know, I have seen some. You've shared a lot of those photos with me, and they do have a timeless beauty to them, which is awesome. And your children are going to look at them someday and too and be like, wow, look what Dad did. Look at these moments that he captured of ours. And you know, you're telling that there's so much more of a story in that than these disgusting iPhone pictures that people post, like 50 pictures of their kid and they just vomit them onto Facebook. You know, the amount of time that you're taking into the framing and the lighting and the processing, you're creating these timeless, beautiful, encapsulated moments. And I love that. And that's what I have found inspiring me, not yet quite to go there, but I do appreciate and respect that, because you know, you've really dove in head
I
first.
appreciate that.
Yeah, but it's interesting, Chuck, because there's a lot of photographers that we've talked to and I'm friends with, and even that will be future guests, that transitioned between the film and the digital era and never looked back at film and never will.
Mhm.
I can't even tell you how many working photographers that I know. And because of my age, most of these photographers were really actively, you know, they started actively working, let's say in the 90s,
Mhm.
and they worked in the 90s into the 2000s. And then once the transition occurred, they were like, I will never shoot a roll of film again. They even keep their film cameras. You know, we've had these guests on. They keep them. They will not sell them, even though that these cameras, like there's guys on this podcast right here, right now that would buy them in a heartbeat.
Mhm.
So, you know, as an artist, it's commendable, and I guess it's kind of your directive. Like, I guess you don't even have a choice. Like, you have to do it this way. That's how it has to be done. So I get it. I do. I'm just like, I'm not sure I'm like going to get back into doing processing and all that kind of thing.
This coming from a guy that just bought what did you just buy? The Leica
The Beyond.
latest, yeah, which is, you know, the how does you tell him, Adam? I can't even describe it.
It's a camera stand that they made from like the late 50s until about 1970 that you can click an M camera to, and then you can basically take photographs of your negatives. And I think it was originally made, yeah. And so I found some dude in Germany. He sent it to me with a macro lens. It's all set up. Literally, I just put it on a little light table, and voila. And I've been scanning with my old CCD sensor M bodies, which have what, you know, Daniel and I will talk about. Like, they're the closest thing to looking like film from digital. And the results are pretty incredible. The reason why I bought that was not necessarily because I'm going to dive into doing my own processing. And it's also partly because I have so many negatives that have never been properly scanned, you know, that I went to the dip and dunk and just, you know, and just got a reference scan because I was too cheap or lazy to pay for an expensive scanner. I didn't want to send it somewhere. So that's partly why. But
I have an archive of unscanned negatives.
right? What do you do with that?
Slow. I'm looking here because this is where I keep my negatives. Depending, I'll scan. You know, depending. You know, I pick and choose. It's a pick and choose. There's projects in my head where I want to take certain things and make something, you know, whole out of you know, various aspects of my work.
Right.
But sometimes it's a project and I pull them and I scan them. If you know, sometimes the negatives are printed and never scanned. You know, sometimes they're scanned and never printed. You know, it varies.
Right.
It just varies. And no, you know, that would be there's no. I certainly don't have enough days in my life to properly scan, you know, what's in these files. And it's, and also another bottom line, how much, what's really, 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 really worthy of scanning, worthy of printing? What's, what is it that you want to say or do with your work?
Do you feel that if you could have an easy way of making, let's say, contact sheets of all the unscanned archives, that if somebody, like, even if
Well,
you
I have
had,
wait a minute. Contact sheets I have. I have my negs contacts. No,
okay.
they're contact sheeted. No,
Okay.
I have negatives and contact sheets. I mean, there's a few rolls that are not contact sheets, but 99.5% of my work is negatives with contacts.
So you could
have
legitimately go back at any point and just be like, okay, you know what, I overlooked this image somehow. It's got to be seen.
That's, now you're opening up a whole new envelope.
Oh, good.
That happens all the time.
That's awesome.
And I am certainly not alone. Nowhere near my alone in saying this. I mean, there are friends of mine who, you take a look at a contact sheet of something that you shot 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, or even 10 years ago.
Right.
And there's your various check marks or whatever. Or let's say it was something from 30 years ago, and it was somewhere, and you were shooting personal whatever, but you were on assignment somewhere, so you were in a country and you were shooting whatever you could for black and white, and maybe a couple of those frames on that roll had a grease pencil or grease penciled, and they were printed as 8x10 for possible licensing, to magazine, possibly. Okay, go back over that roll now, and look at some of those. Look at the images, and it's like, okay, the ones that are circled, they're okay, they're fine. But then there's another one stuck somewhere. It's like, holy shit, where the fuck did this come from? And it's like, because as you get older, and this is where age comes in. This is ageism, man. As you get older, your whole perspective, your life, how you see things, how you view the world, how you view images, how you see composition, what you read into it. Once you're reading, what are you reading into? Because you're bringing your life experience to that image. You're bringing what you're seeing from it. You shot it at a particular time. You saw whatever you saw, whether that is the same or transcends or just morphs into what you then see 30 years later.
Yeah.
It'd be a whole different story. And friends of mine, we said the same thing. It's like, your life story, first of all, are on those contact sheets. I mean, they're not digital. They haven't been like thrown in the trash. There's the contact sheet. There's your 36 or 35 or 20 or whatever it is frames, your mistakes, your better ones, your whatever. Let's say there's one frame that's different than all the rest on that roll, and all the rest of that roll is okay, but that one frame is so different. It's like, wow. It's like, I never even imagined that. And so that's why now going through contact sheets, I mean, sometimes I sit here and I'll just pull open a drawer and not even see what year, whatever, pull a file, start looking at contact sheets, and take a grease pencil and go, shit. It's like, the one that was checked, it's okay. And then it's like, wow, where did that come from? And it's like, I should do something with this. But it's like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to go make a print of it and that no one will see? Or that might eventually, or am I going to scan it and then maybe make a print of it? And if I do scan it, what am I going to do with it? Is it going to go into stock? Am I going to use it for a project? It's like, but you're bringing your age, your time spent on this earth changes your perspective of what you're looking at. Case in point, and bringing back to music, I photographed in the late 70s the pianist Marion McPartland.
Yep.
At some supper club / something or another in Chicago, and she was just, really nice, sweet, older woman, and very nice. And and she said to me, she gave me her card or whatever. She goes, could you let me see? I said, of course, sure, whatever. And it was like really, really, really dark. Maybe I had like a little tabletop tripod, or maybe even not. Maybe I was just trying to balance the camera. And almost all of that, when I first saw the process roll, I said to myself, "Shit, you suck." It's like some of them were soft. Some of them, you're shooting at 15th or 1/8 of a second or whatever, even if it's balanced. If it's movement, but some of it's just maybe the focus is a little off, and it's like, shit, I can't send her anything. I'd be embarrassed. This sucks. I never sent her anything. I never got back in touch with her. Last year, I saw that roll of film, and I looked at it from, was it a 40-year difference?
Right.
And I said to myself, most of these still suck. but
some do.
That frame has such a nice feeling to it, and it was who I learned who she was. There was a softness to it, and she was a soft, nice woman. And if ever you've listened to the Marion McPartland, whatever piano hours or whatever she does with different musicians, she's done them. She's not alive anymore, but when she did them, she was just so sweet and nice and open and soft. And so there was a couple of frames where I said, shit, I'm going to scan this. This has something to it now. Right. This resonates with me. Whereas in the past, it didn't even resonate. It just was all garbage. And then when I looked at that, I said to myself, shit, I should have made a print and sent that to her.
Right.
Knowing that, seeing that's her, she would have appreciated it.
I think that that's a pretty common thing, though, as an artist, is the self-doubt that constantly, unfortunately, pollutes our brains. It's like, because we never think we're good enough. And I mean, look, there's some people that have huge egos, whatever. But, I think another common thread that's come around in these talks is that the reason why most of us do this is because we're in that constant pursuit of being better and bettering ourselves, and we're not there yet, so we're just constantly just moving it forward. You started in the beginning, like saying, like, we just got to move forward. And I've been there too. I've gone back to archives. I haven't been shooting nearly as long as you, but I go back and I look at stuff. I'm like, why didn't I, share this? Or why didn't I put time? Like, this is good, or it's got a different story. At the time, I overlooked it because it didn't resonate with me, or it didn't fit into what I thought was something. But then you go back and your mind, you're maybe you're not as, wound up as you were, full of angst when you were younger. And you look at stuff and you see the human condition. You see something like a quality. So I love that story about Marion.
One of my favorite shots of yours, Chuck, is the dizzy shot where you talk about soft, little blurry, who knows what, the 30th of a second, and his movement, whatever you might have been at.
The trumpet's a little soft.
Yeah. And
I love that.
See the movement, and it's the framing, it's the bottom. I don't know if that was intentional or if it just, happened to be the frame and where it was. But sometimes to me, we get so caught up with how sharp is it, and what does it look like at 100%? What does it look like at 200? Can I go 300%? Maybe. I don't know. Let's see.
That's because digital looks pretty shitty when it's soft compared to film.
Well, yeah, adding to the charm and the
mostly
as a film. But sometimes you get an emotion that you don't get from a bit of a softer image and something that has movement to it, not like terrible camera shake where it looks like shit.
Right.
But sometimes it looks like shit.
and
it's charming, and there's a charm to it where you don't get that with the digital.
You can call it art.
Yeah.
You can call it art. You can call it motion blur, camera shake, whatever you want.
Yeah, but I gotta agree with you that, like, especially on film, if you have like a little softer image, there's a beauty in it. Absolutely,
it's more forgiving. I think. I think that's the beauty of film, is that people don't realize, like, everyone's so hung up on camera resolution, And they don't realize that film had the highest resolution of any digital camera ever. I mean, there's no comparison. You know, when you look at the detail, I mean, that picture of Sadat, I mean, I can touch his flesh. It's like, it's three-dimensional. How do you, it's nearly impossible to achieve that look with digital.
So that was the 5D Mark IV, right?
Yeah, it's so amazing.
Kodachrome 64, man.
Unfucking real. I mean, like,
on a tripod.
The grain structure.
Remember, for some of these guys watching, maybe it's tripod. It's something that people used to use that has 3 legs.
Now people
just
shoot at 40,000 ISO, and you don't need a tripod.
Right, and it's clean at 40,000.
Yeah, clean. You got that. I'm adding grain.
Yeah,
I really got to say, I wish so much that I could shoot Kodachrome or just experience it. I kind of just got into film when they finished, when you couldn't develop it anymore, and I just see these shots from the 60s and 70s, and they just look so beautiful. And yeah.
Well, plus, the fact that with Kodachrome, after you shot it, it wasn't as if you can turn it around in the lab and see it in 90 minutes like you could with E6, with Ektachrome, E6 films. You had to wait. You had to wait. And if you were somewhere else, as myself and friends of mine, sometimes you had to wait months before you saw it.
I'm just not that patient of a man.
Yeah, but even if it was rush, you had to wait. Maybe a day, and that was rush. And there was a beauty. There was an anxiety, a rush of opening up that yellow box, sliding open, ripping open, and just like flipping it around and looking at the first one, and it's like shit. But then maybe laying them out as a grid and going okay, or sometimes with your loop you just kind of like shit, damn. It's like put that aside.
I found a whole box of my mother's father's slides.
Oh, you got to scan those, man.
I've been scanning some, and the Kodachrome, I see the Fuji and I see the ones from Kodak, and honestly, like it's mostly Kodak, and just the colors are the blues and the greens. It's
a black and white film. Kodachrome is a black and white film it's not the dyes. It's like Ektachrome fades. Kodachrome doesn't fade. And the reason is because there's layers of Kodachrome that it's initially, technically I'm probably screwing this up, but the dyes, whatever that make Ektachrome, they fade. They're not considered, let's say, archival, or they're not, they don't have a very necessarily much of a longevity. Kodachrome is a black and white film with layers upon layers, so that will not fade. So that's why those colors, and has, of course, the colors that it has. It's a black and white film.
So to me, when I look at these old photos, especially the night shots, have like a certain magic to them. Just these when you shoot neon signs, or it just looks beautiful, and I don't think you can replicate that in digital at all.
I don't know.
Josh's like, fuck digital, man. I don't know, man.
Hey, digital. If digital pays bills, fine.
Yeah.
It's like, you want to. Is there money involved in this? It's a job. It's digital. Period. It's digital, and that's just fine. And it's work, and we all need work. Work is work, and of course,
no one's got it right now, but we all need it. No one's got it.
And one tries to have as much fun as possible when you're working, because why be a photographer then?
Right.
So you still want to get as much as you can out of it. And you finish the digital, you finish it, you get it, and you get rid of it, and then it's done.
So digital is sort of like a one night stand for you. And
I haven't had a one night.
But film is your partner.
Yeah. Well, also that little Fuji film camera. I mean, if I'm just, if I was just going to walk around or something, it used to be strictly if I'm walking around, I'll have the M6, with a roll of Tri-X in it. That was slowly replaced by the Fuji film. If there was nothing that I was really going to be shooting, if I really was going to be shooting something that had a personal, that I felt.
This is sponsored by Fuji, by the way, this podcast. So. If there's nothing really important, or something I wanted to, there's something I didn't give a shit about.
For my disposable photography.
Listen, if I was given an M10, then it would replace.
I'd sell it and buy Tri-X.
Then that would be my walk around digital camera as opposed to that little Fuji thing. But
why'd you wink at me, Chuck? When you said that?
But I'm not being given an M10, and besides, I'm not walking around anywhere anyway. So so it's moot.
So you're probably talking about like an X100 type camera.
Yeah.
Like the fixed lens.
He doesn't even know what it is.
Well, no, whatever.
He doesn't.
It's just a tool,
He can't even tell you what it is.
I mean, look, I can honestly say
that's what it is.
That's what it is. Hey, it's what it is. Yeah, what it was.
No, there's the thing,
It's got.
Sometimes still pick up the thing, turn it on, push the wrong button, and the thing, push the wrong button. It's like, shit, can't take the picture now.
Memory card formatted. SD card formatted. Oh.
Well, the only thing I'll say, and we don't need to really dive too deep on it, is I had those X100 cameras. I shot with them. They're fine. Then I picked up a digital M and I put some M glass on it. And I was like, I couldn't get rid of that Fuji fast enough. Just saying, but whatever.
No doubt. I would have no doubt.
Yeah.
Done.
And I'm shooting with 10, 11-year-old Leica bodies, the original, CCD full frame that I love. I think the look that they achieve is so much nicer than like a modern digital, whatever, but we don't need to get into that. But yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, look, Fuji's doing their own thing. They're trying to get their color science to, out there and it's a vibe. It's a thing. But now you've kind of made me want to go out and buy an M6.
Classic.
I want to buy that Fuji.
I'll depart all the rules. He had me talking to Sherry, and I've shared my experiences. Chuck has introduced me to Sherry, not personally, but anyway, told me if you're sending your Leica to someone, your film, it's got to be Sherry.
Yeah,
and I've talked to Sherry a handful and a half of times on the phone. And sometimes she'll keep me on the phone for 45 minutes. And sometimes she's like, what the fuck are you doing calling me? I'm busy. And I'm like, sorry, Sherry. And I hang up the phone. You never call her before 1 PM. You can call her 10 o'clock at night, apparently. But I just sent her my M6 and she adjusted the rangefinder on it. And it is so, I didn't realize how off it was.
Because it's not back focusing anymore?
No, never back focused. Those are my lenses. Those are my lenses. But from all the talking to her, I actually sent her something. And then I got it back. And she's like, you could send me a check. I was like, oh my God. I wrote a check and I mailed her a check. I'm like, it worked. And I got my camera 2 days later.
Wow. You didn't have to fax her a confirmation?
I think Western Union. I think I sent someone a horse and carriage.
Oh my God!
Go pick it up.
It is. Look, it's amazing, and I love the fact that Chuck has kind of mentored you, because this is a dying art, you know, film and film processing and scanning, like this whole, not scanning as much, but maybe to some degree, but processing film. And, you know, just when you were talking about like adding that, like, you know, that bleach stuff to get the whites, whatever, like this whole process is something that, you know, is shrinking. You know, there's an enthusiast crowd, you know, like Mark and Daniel and myself to a little degree, and a lot of other people out there, but it's small. It's like the people that are really into like still, you know, producing and listening to vinyl records, you know, it's like, why bother? You know, you can listen to anything you want. So it's pretty awesome that Chuck, you're, you know, so willing and able to help and corrupt people like Daniel, who went way deep down a rabbit hole and now probably has more film gear than you've had in your entire life.
Probably.
I think Chuck's still up on me.
Oh yeah.
I still need the M2.
That's awesome.
That M2 I got in college. Paid $140 for a mint body, no lens, mint. Used it when I was shooting in college, and in a bar, doing a little essay in a small town bar, and could shoot with that. It was the first thing I could shoot in low light, and no mirror, and it was an opening. It was eye opening. It was eye opening.
What lens did you put on it back then?
The 8
element one. Okay.
Summicron. Yeah, 8 element Summicron. It did have the lock on it, which was a pain in the ass, but that was my first real foray into shooting with Leica. Was the bar scene in this small town.
And I also love it that, you know, we all three of us, Adam, Mark, and myself, we buy gear, we sell gear, we see if we like it, we see if we love it, and then we probably still sell it anyways, but we become sentimentally attached to certain things. And you are sentimentally attached to every piece of gear that you own, including the Fuji. I know you are. Okay, you know, whatever. It was gifted to you, but it's probably gifted to you 8 years ago, and you still have it. You haven't upgraded. You haven't, you know, the M2 you still have, M3, M6.
It's a snappy camera. It's
snappy.
You have the important thing, the gear that's important to you, that helps you do what you do.
Right.
And everything else is just, it's not necessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's you know, it's inspiring coming from, you know, I'm on the, it's like,
look,
it's an addiction to,
when Chuck, excuse me, when Chuck was cutting his teeth, there weren't tremendous options out there. There was no internet. There was like you bought a camera and that was your camera. You know, like you didn't think like, oh, I'm going to buy like 20 cameras, you know, because, you know, I see all these other people using them all over the place, you know, so I don't think that the mentality was
but now, I mean, you know, he knows what works for you, and you're not interested in, you like having, you know, your view of your work and how you get your work, and
goes back to the predictable results, even amidst the chaos and the variables of the
predictable chaos,
developer and the fixer and the film and temperature and blah blah blah. You're still using the same basic essentials to get there.
He opens a developer, you smell it. No, I'm serious.
It's still, you know, really, really, really nice when you get the first roll out of the fix and you just do. That's the initial. That was when chimping. That's the original definition of chimping. Checking your, just to say, oh, I got an image. Oh, and it's not too thin.
Right. There's some density to this negative. Thank God.
Let me just roll it back and put it back, let it go all the way. But, you know, when going back, you know, Adam, when you said the cameras, the 20 of them, you had to choose your system though. When as a photographer, you had to, what system am I going to go into? And basically, is it going to be Nikon? Is it going to be Canon? You know, and those are the two real choices then. But then you're buying into that system. So how many bodies, which lenses, and you know, and that's what you work with.
Yeah.
But then it was also you had your single lens reflex equipment, you know, and then you always had at least your one or two Leicas. You had your single. I mean, this is a whole different. This is then you had your single lens reflex equipment, and separate from that, you had your Leica or Leica.
So nothing's really changed, because that's essentially how all the three of us still operate now. We've got our kind of SLRs, you know, and we've got our Leicas. And the SLRs, like, you know, I use my Sony because it has the IAF and all that other stuff that I don't have to recompose. I don't have to focus and recompose. So if I'm doing certain work, you know, and I'm tethered to a computer and, you know, this whole whatever workflow, it liberates me to just be in that moment and not have to have any of the technical stuff, you know, kind of involved for rapidly capturing what I need to do. Whereas when I want to be artistic and I'm doing more of my personal work, I'm just grabbing a Leica body. You know, I'm taking away all of that stuff, and I'm really getting much more into the soul and the feel. But, you know, now I feel like I should just be grabbing my film cameras and just screw all the digital stuff.
Do it, man.
They're sitting right here. I mean, you know, I got the M3 right here. Boom.
Single stroke.
Yeah, single stroke.
There you go. There you go.
It's good to go, man.
Yeah.
that was the Pornhub. I don't know if you guys realized what you just entered, you know.
Oh, we could get even further. No, we won't. Awesome. That's awesome. Well, look, maybe this is our point where we put the tape deck on pause, because this probably won't be the last time we chat. But man, what a treat. What do you think? Anything else? We got any other stuff to go through, or are we there for now?
I can tell an M2 story.
Okay, come on. One M2 story.
Okay. All right. This is an Ayatollah Khomeini story. Also.
Wow.
I photographed the Ayatollah Khomeini, who was, for those in this audience who have no idea what I'm talking about, just Google Ayatollah Khomeini, Khom, okay, Khomeini. Photographed him while he was still in exile in Neaufle-Château, which was a small village outside of Paris, and basically 1 week before he went back to Iran to lead the revolution. I was outside. There was a French journalist who was helping me. I was outside. And you congregated. The Khomeini had his house, and then where he prayed across the street every day, and there were crowds of the faithful, of the devout, of the revolutionaries who would be there, you know, all the time. And when Khomeini would make his trip across the street, you know, arms would lock, and so nobody could get through. So shooting, shooting. If I got in the front row, these guys, hold my elbows, and I would get one camera up, and I'd be able to do this, and do, as he walked by. Or sometimes he would stand there at a microphone and give speeches, and that was for a couple of days. Well, I was trying to get in the house, obviously, where he was, to really do something exclusive, and I wasn't getting in. And this French guy was my only source to get in, because he knew the clergy and the son-in-law, Khomeini's son-in-law, and we were told, like, no, you basically keep asking, and finally it came down to, I had to leave France. I had to coming to the States. I had to shoot in Washington, like the next day. It was like the last day, and so I had all my stuff with me. The French guy, the journalist, and we were talking with the son-in-law, and the son-in-law was in a cute mood. He was in a playful mood. So he's speaking to him in French, whatever. And then the son-in-law said, maybe like time enough, and it's like just to get in, just like a few seconds, a minute, just maybe time for one picture. And he was just being, he was just like playing. He was really playing. Maybe for one picture. And the French guy looked at me, one picture? I said, yes. Two pictures. And so make a relatively long story a little shorter. I got into the house, checked, frisked, everything checked. Had my donkey bag, had my 3 SLRs and my 1 M2, my 135, loaded with Tri-X, fresh roll, and thinking poorly. I didn't know, also in a situation like this and like many of them, you don't know what you're walking into. You don't know what the light's going to be. You don't know if there's a window. You don't know if there's anything. You don't know from shit. So you don't know what to set your ASA at. This is, not your ISO, guys. You don't know, you don't know where to go with this thing. So I had my tripod, I had a flash. I'm going in there thinking as a commercial magazine photojournalist. Go in there, make magazine covers, man. I'm telling myself, make magazine covers. Go, shoot color, make magazine covers. So get in, led through the hallway, and led to a doorway, and there's Khomeini sitting in this little room near a window on this mattress. I think there's a picture on my website, on this mattress and this flowered wallpaper, and the son-in-law says something to him as to who he is, who I am, and I don't know if I'm supposed to bow, if I'm supposed to touch him. I don't know from anything. I'm a schmuck. I'm there. I just want to get. So and I got my bag. I've got tripod. I got so I kind of like, and he looks up. He's reading letters. He looks up and it's like basically like looking at like, who the fuck is he? Like half bow and half like take my. I don't know if I'm allowed and try to shake his hand. He gives me his hand like that. And I'm saying to myself, okay, shit. Okay. Like I don't have any time. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? So as soon as I got in, I took my M2 and basically put it in the corner on the floor, just on the wall, against the wall, away from where I was going to be shooting from. Just left it there. Said to myself, okay, magazine covers, set up a tripod. Meanwhile, I have his attention for almost no time. Set up a tripod, put a flash on it, run a long cord from the flash. I figured let's get some, shoot some relatively tight heads with some half decent light, and maybe I'll get magazine covers out of it. Okay, fine, let's try that. And they sucked. And I was having problems with the flash. I was having problems with the cord, and I'm shaking my hand, and I'm on a tripod with this, and it's like. And I click, and I'm doing a few pictures, and my time is up. And basically, I was told, okay. And so I grabbed the tripod with the flash on it, my bag, and the cameras, they're on my shoulders, and the son-in-law, walk out, leaves me out of the room. I walk out of the room. I forgot my M2. I legitimately. No, that's where it got good, and that's where it got good. I legitimately forgot my M2 because I had to leave. I had to grab my stuff and walk out. So as I walked out of the door, I said, as I walked out of the doorway, I went, naive and everything, like, oh, I forgot my camera. Yeah, so without saying anything, like I dropped myself, walked back in, picked up the watching me from the doorway. I picked up the M2 and realized, fuck, motherfucker, shoot. Took the M2, walked the 5 feet over so I had Khomeini in front of me, and just mumbled in German, in just gibberish, just as a schmuck, just saying, oh, black and white, little camera. Tourist. Yeah. I remember just saying, oh, black and white, little camera. And with the M2, wide open, 35 Summicron, I shot maybe 6 frames, boom, boom, boom. Just used him as an object. Used Khomeini as an object, vertical, horizontal, boom, boom, boom. I was literally taken out of the room. I mean, they came over me more than one, and I was like, you know, they were on me, not roughed up or anything, but just I was dragged out of the room. But I got like 6 or 7 frames, and those were the pictures.
Brilliant. I'm looking at it right now. The one with him sitting in there, he's on the floor, and he's got like he's reading a letter.
Yeah, and that's what he was doing.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and it's the story is there. It's incredible. It's awesome.
And it was from one of those pictures, one of the horizontals of that Life magazine scheduled as a mock-up to have a double-page spread from one of those pictures. They then killed it because he went back to Iran before they went to deadline, and they killed my picture, and they used the picture, you know, pictures of him returning to Tirana.
Wow.
That's a beautiful photo. I just checked it.
Yeah, it is.
Did you use
really.
Tri-X on that, or probably? Yeah, beautiful. Just
And
got that.
And it was at and shot at 1/50th at f2.
Wow. Well, that's the thing you can do with a rangefinder that you really couldn't have done with an SLR, you know, and having it be that tack sharp. So
that's my story, man. That's my M2. That's the last. That's it.
That's a beautiful story.
That's a pretty good one. That's a pretty good one.
I think we leave that on a high note. So guys, here we are. We find ourselves at the end of this incredible podcast with legendary photographer Chuck Fishman. He said it all. He's been there. He's done it. He grabbed the little camera when he needed to, used the big one when necessary. He's got all the tools. He's got all the stuff. I'm so inspired. I had such an incredible time. All of us had an incredible time. I think Chuck even had a good time.
I did.
Yeah, no, we really did. And what a treat this has been. And now, before you go, and thank you for staying this long on the podcast, all you guys listening and watching, we are going to take you to Chuck Fishman Photography at Instagram, right? At
Chuck Fishman Photo is Instagram.
At Chuck Fishman Photo is Instagram.
And Chuck Fishman Photography is Facebook.
Okay, so Chuck Fishman Photo. Look, you're going to find the guy, chuckfishman.com, Chuck Fishman Photo Instagram, Chuck Fishman Photography on Facebook. There's a lot of F's going on right here. Find this guy, follow his work, buy his prints, buy his books. Really just check it out. I'm so inspired. Thank you again for being here. That's it for now, and we'll see you soon.